music. Right, okay, I'm back again. So I think everyone can, right, I'm back again and we're ready to start the video. I think everyone can see. I've made it big so that everyone can see. I'll put that up there. Right, I'm really not good at the computer thing, but I am having to learn in defense of our country. I can't see if anybody's on, and I can't see any comments either. But anyway, we're going to start this video and see if we can get it going. Hope everybody can hear me. I know that Alfie was there before, who's a very dedicated member. I don't know why I don't see the comments when some, but I can't seem to see the comments right there. There, and I can't see the comments. But anyway, we're going to get started. SOS, SOS. This videos go out to several other sites, cancelled sites, Australia, Canada, America, England, all of the English-speaking countries that are in a lot of trouble. And what I've been discovering through my research is that in all of our countries, the laws have been, and none of us knows what's going on, and we're not realizing that all of our countries are interconnected, and all of the laws and constitutions and been changed have happened in each one of our countries. And what the reason why we don't understand what's going on is because we don't understand each other's countries and what's going on in each other's countries. Now, I recently did a video about carta, and then I did a video about the 1688 Bill of Rights. Then I did a video about in New Zealand. Now, each country, Canada, Australia, England, New Zealand, we all, even America, we all have different constitutions, but they are all very similar in nature. And what had happened was, in a roundabout, so don't quote me on exact dates, in 1587 or 1607, the British Empire ruled America, and up until 1783. And there was a big battle that went on in America between I don't understand the American history, but there was one group that was fighting against the British. They wanted the British out, and they didn't want the British to govern. And so they went up against the British, and some of the states won. Some of the states stayed under British Commonwealth, and some of them did not, surprisingly enough. Now, in Australia, 1788, they were colonised, and Canada was 1776. New Zealand was discovered in 1769. Now, I'm not believing that these countries were just miraculously, nobody knew that they were there, and all of a sudden, all of them were discovered in the same time. I'm not believing it. And Africa came later. They were colonized in the 1870s. Now, what happened was in New Zealand, Australia, Samuel Marsden and the Church Missionary Society went to Australia and set up camp there. And New Zealand was a dependent of Australia, because what had happened was Abel Tasman had discovered Norfolk Island, and it was uninhabited. discovered that was connected to Australia, and then that also gave them rights over New Zealand. And at that time, New Zealand became a state of Australia, but they just left the New Zealand Maori there because New Zealand Maori, well, you know, it was the times that, and they were very protective of their country. And if anybody tried to get into their country, they used to eat them. But you know, it was their country and they were trying to protect it, so that's what they did. So a lot of people didn't want New Zealand because the natives were considered to be too uncivilized for it to become a civilized country. But anyway, after different agreements were made with the chiefs, that they made this plan, all of these groups in England had made this plan when they colonized, to make agreements with individual chiefs in each area. And this is how they did it. They divided up the tribes, they divided up the chiefs, and they made agreements with each chief. And no chief knew what the other chief was doing. So one chief was selling and another one was not selling. And this Freemasons, or whatever you call, they caused absolute chaos in these countries. And then what happened was they sent shiploads of thousands of slaves to each of these countries to build the nations and to build countries. That's why we were sent there. And now previously to that, in England, in 1215, we had all of the French kings going to invade England, and we had the people rise up in the Glorious Revolution to overcome these churches and these religions that were always keeping them in slavery. So we had the Glorious Revolution. This is where we're up to in our New Zealand, what we're doing now. Now, nowadays, what's going on in our countries is they've got this decolonization movement. And what they've decided to do is that now the countries have been built, and now that when we were all living in harmony, the Australians were living in harmony with their Aboriginals, the New Zealand people were living in harmony with the New Zealand Maori, the Canadians were living in harmony with their First Nations people, the Americans were living in harmony with their American Indians. And then what these people have done is they've come on in and they've decided to stir up the ant's nest. And they've started this huge decolonization movement. And what they've decided to do is to put all the natural resources back into the hands of individual chiefs. Now, these chiefs were chosen 200 years ago. They weren't chosen now. This has been planned for 250, maybe even 300 years. They've had this planned. And what they're doing is they're putting all our natural resources into the hands of the chiefs, and then they're scooping it up and putting it into the UN global corporations. And this is what they're saying, that you will own nothing. Everyone will own nothing. Now, where we've got to start with the Queen, and I'm going to be talking today. Today we're going to talk about we're going to combine all of our laws of New Zealand. And then we've got to look at Australia's constitution and Canada's constitutions and English constitution. What I can tell you is this: New Zealand, England, and Israel are the only 3 countries in the entire world who currently don't have a constitution. And I'm wondering why that is. Why doesn't England have a constitution? We all had constitutions before. Why Israel? I'm very suspicious. And why New Zealand? I'm very suspicious. We are a civilized country, and in civilized countries, you always have a constitution for the people. This is the standard theme of the day for hundreds of years. And why have they left New Zealand without a constitution, and England without a constitution, and Israel without a constitution? Something going on here. So let's go and have a look here. A lot of people are complaining to me and saying to me, why do we stand under the Queen? What I'm trying to explain to you, here's the colonization of 5 countries of America in 1650, English, and overthrown actually in 1776. Australia, 1788, and in 1794. So Samuel Marsden arrived in Australia for the Church Missionary Society. Canada was in 1763, New Zealand 1799, all around about the same time, and Africa in 1880, that they were all colonized. Now, what we should look at here is that in 1215 we had the Magna Carta. In 1688 we had the Bill of Rights for the people. And then around about after 1688, what we think was that the papal leaders and the leaders were fighting against the secular king, as were fighting for 400 years. When the 1688 Bill of Rights came in, they went out into all of our countries and decided to move the fight there. And there's a lot that I can't talk about in one video, but if you go and research it, you'll find that they moved the fight out of England and they moved it into. Now, is it because they wanted to start the fight, or is it because they wanted to bring the slaves in to build the countries? Because the natives, it was going to be too hard to teach the natives all of the skills, carpentry skills, electric skills, stonemason skills. They were never going to be able to teach the natives all of those skills in a short amount of time. So what they did was colonize them, and then they scooped up thousands of people. Now, all of these people are being blamed for the colonization. They're saying, all you people colonized our countries and you're all evil, and now you've all got to get out. Now that the country's been built, we want you all to get out and you've got no power. But in actual fact, all of the people that were scooped up, they are just as much victims in all of this as what the native peoples are. And this is something that we have to understand. Now, the 1688 Glorious Revolution, and we were given the 1689 Bill of Rights. And here's what it says here. It's important that you understand what it says here, because I'll go to the highlighter. That you see here, Her Royal Highness, it should be his actually, for whom it has pleased Almighty God, go to another colour here, for whom it has pleased Almighty God to make the glorious instrument of delivering this kingdom from popery and arbitrary power. Now, it's very important that you understand what it says here. It doesn't say that Her Majesty or His Majesty will rule over you. It doesn't mean that they will govern you. It says that they will be the glorious instrument to deliver the kingdom from popery and arbitrary power. That's all. That is Her Majesty's goal. Her Majesty is there to protect your rights. And a lot of these people are saying, oh, why doesn't the Queen go and do this? And why doesn't Her Majesty go and do that? It's not up to her. She has no power to interfere in our governance. What is Her Majesty's power? Her Majesty's power is to protect the 1688 revolution, is to protect our rights. And that's all she does. And if we want her to protect our rights, she can't just step in and say, hey, we're going to protect your rights. It's up to the people to call to Her Majesty and say, hey, Majesty the Queen, our rights are being invaded, because she is the glorious instrument to protect our rights. Now, let's go and look at the Magna Carta. I'm not going to go through every single section because I've already done it one time. But this is the 1215 Magna Carta, and I'm going to show you the difference between the two. That it says here, first, that we have granted to God. You see here? These people that wrote the Magna Carta decided that they had the power to grant to God. And in the 1688 Bill of Rights, it says that God grants the Queen to be the instrument. And so that is very different. By this present charter have confirmed for us and our heirs in perpetuity that the English Church shall be free and shall have its rights undiminished and its liberties unimpaired. So this is not talking about the people. This is talking about the church. It says we, not God, we have granted and confirmed by charter the freedom of the churches' elections. So they granted elections to the church, not to the people. A right reckoned to be of the greatest necessity and the importance to it. Now, this is in the Magna Carta, and this is saying that they have confirmed that the church, not you, will have elections. Here it says that we wish this so to be observed appears from the fact that of our own free will, before the outbreak of the present dispute between us and our barons, and cause this to be confirmed by Pope Innocent III. So who are the parties involved here? It is the English Church, it is the nobles and the barons, and it is the Pope himself, who have granted to God these rights that they have granted to themselves. So they've said to God, these are the rights that we intend to have for ourselves. This freedom we shall observe ourselves and desire to be observed in good by our heirs in perpetuity. These are some of the freedoms. Now, the free man were the knights, the earls, and the barons that owned the land. So the people that owned the land were the people that had these rights in the Magna Carta. Nobody else in the Magna Carta had the rights. To all free men of our kingdom, we have also granted for us and our heirs forever. Now, this is important that you remember I should put that there. This is important that you remember forever. So they've granted, so that means that this document stands today. It doesn't matter what they say in the courts. It doesn't matter what they say anywhere. This document was signed. It was legal. I don't know that it has been repealed. Some parts of it were. But if you look back to the Pope and the ecclesial leaders and all of those high people, in their minds, the 1215 Magna Carta is the one that they believe, because it says forever. All the liberties written out below to have and to keep for them and of us and our heirs. Altogether, there were 62 articles in the Magna Carta for the nobles. I'm not going to read all 62, but I'm only going to read a couple that are being called upon today. No free man shall be imprisoned or deceased or exiled or in any way destroyed, nor will we go upon him nor seize upon him except by the lawful judgment of his peers. Now, let me tell you about his peers. This is saying that when the nobles and when the church leaders And when the barons go to the courts, they must be judged by their peers. And if you read the Magna Carta carefully, one of the sections, it explains to you peers have to be of equal status. So a knight would have knights as the peers to judge him. The earl would have earls as peers to judge him. The Pope would have other papal leaders as peers to judge him. The barons have only so no one below their status is allowed to judge them. And this is why you're saying, hey, I saw that guy over there committing that molestation of that child. Why isn't he going to court? Hey, I see that politician over there has lied and deceived us. Why isn't he going to court? And I'll tell you why. Because they have their, my opinion, they have their backdoor secret courts that we know nothing about. And in these secret, they are judged by people of equal peerage, of equal status to them. So this is why we don't see them in our courts, by them standing down from their post, and you might see them getting a lower salary, or they might lose their status in the government, because this would have been by the judgment of their lawful peers. In my opinion, that there is a secret government of these Magna Carta descendants going on in a different realm to what we live in. In 1215, England had been ruled by the series of French popes and appointed kings. The English speakers were considered to be retards, imbeciles, and stupid because they only spoke one language, and most couldn't read and they couldn't write. And these people were called peons. In English, a peon or peonage have meanings. What it means is that these were the slaves. In addition to the definition, I'll go to a smaller pen here. In addition to the definition of a forced labourer, a peon may also be defined as a person with little authority, often assigned unskilled tasks, an underling or a person subjected to capricious or unreasonable oversight. In this sense, the peon can be used as a derogatory term. Synonyms for the peon are called a drudge, a farmhand, a gopher, a labourer. Who remembers back in the 1970s, where even in the 1800s, we were all called labourers. What they were talking about was slaves. We all thought that it was a good thing to be a labourer. But in fact, in their definition of a labourer, it in fact meant by the Magna Carta that we were slaves. We were peasants, we were serfs, we were servants. And if you see down here, these were some of the torture. In this particular torture, they would tie the man up to the circle over here. Can you see down here? And he would turn it around and around and around. You can see the churchly ecclesial leaders, which were usually from the Catholics or from the Judaist sect. And they would give these tortures to the peon slaves. Now, none of the knights or the earls or the barons were subjected to these kinds of tortures. Only the labourers and the peasants, because where it says here, over here, where it's talking about the judgment of the peers, that's only for the nobles. That was not a right given to the normal English speakers. And you see over here on the right-hand side, over here, in this case, the man was forced into the mummy thing, and when it was closed, these spikes here would go into his body, and this one would go into his head, and then he would be left there to die a slow death. These were the tortures. Now, we're always hearing today about black slavery, about the slavery of the African Americans. Let me tell you something. They have got nothing on what the English and the Germanic slaves, Germany was the first one, the German tribes was the first one that was invaded, and then England was invaded, and Scotland was invaded, and Ireland was invaded. And I'm telling you something, the black Americans got nothing on the tortures that our English and Scottish people had to go, and German people had to go through. And I'm going to be pointing that out today because I'm sick to death of hearing that only black people were slaves, black people were tortured. It is just not true. So here he says, this is according to the Magna Carta, and this is from one of my savage friends. I've got a couple of savages in New Zealand, and they like to send me these cartoons, and this is from one of my savage friends in New Zealand. He says, I am the king, I am the king, I own the land, but I have given some of it to the barons. So he gives some of the land to the barons, and then the baron says, I am the baron. The king gave me some land, so I must be loyal to him. Here, I must be ready to fight for him and train knights for him. And I am giving some of my land to the knights. So the baron gave it to the knights. And here is the little peon slave. This is us. This is the laborers. This is what they used to call laborers. Here. And this, how do I spell it? L. A laborer. And he was called a villain, or the villain. This is where the word villain came from. It came from the word peon slave. Now, the New Zealand Maori, they were slaves, and they were called, I always get it mixed up if it's Mokai or Mohai, but I'll put Mokai. So the New Zealand Maoris were slaves to their chiefs as well, and so were the Aborigines, and so were the Africans. A lot of them were slaves to their chiefs as well. He says, I am the villain. The knight gave me some land, so I have to work on this land. And listen to what he must do. I must give him gifts and taxes. I can't even leave the village unless he lets me. So these people were not allowed to leave the village, and they were given land to farm, but of that farming land, they had to give a percentage of it to the knights, and then the knights would give a percentage to the barons, and then the barons would give a percentage to the king, and then the king would give a percentage to the Pope. So you understand that this poor man here, so if we put the knight over here, here's the knight over here, so he had to pay, so it started with him, he had to pay 1, 2, 3, 4 people with his goods, and then he was left with a tiny little bit for himself. Okay, now the ecclesiastical, these are called ecclesiastical leaders here, and ecclesiastical leaders, they were not only the Catholic bishops, they were the Catholic archbishops, they were the Jewish rabbis, and they were also, may even have been the Islamic leaders as well. And it was the Catholic archbishops and the Jewish rabbis together who appointed the king. And then the king appointed the nobles, and the nobles appointed the knights, and the knights appointed the barons, or it might be the other way round. So here's how we know that the Jewish rabbis were involved with this Magna Carta. In section 10 of the Magna Carta, it says, if anyone has borrowed a sum of money from the Jews and he dies before the debt has been repaid, his heir shall pay no interest on the debt for as long as he remains underage. However, when he became of age, he would have to repay the debt of his passed away parent. If the debt would fall on the hands of the crown, which was the king, then it will take nothing except the principal sum specified in the bond. So the people were held in bondage. What these ecclesial leaders, I'm still on here and I'm not even through the Magna Carta, what these ecclesial leaders were doing is they were creating laws that they said were biblical laws. And then they would force the free people to go and do these laws. So I'll just give one example. What they did is they said that anybody who died had to have prayer said over them. And in order to get the prayer said over them, they had to have a religious leader to say the prayer. The religious leader had to be paid. If the family had no money to pay for the prayer over her dead family member, she would have to borrow the money from that churchly leader, and then she would have to pay that money back, and he would go and if the people didn't pay to have this prayer said over the dead people, the people would be sent into punishment. So this was called the pillory, and this here was called the rack, where they stretched people. The bastinado was where they hung people upside down. Each crime of an ecclesiastical crime, a crime against the church, would have a different. So depending on the crime is what you would get. This was called the iron. I'm not sure what would go on here. There was the gossip's bridle. So in other words, if you gossiped, I guess you can go by some of the things that it says here. If you gossiped, then you would be put, because one of the things that was forbidden in these times was free speech. So there was no free speech. And if you spoke against the church, you would probably be given this punishment of the gossip's bridle. Okay? If you maybe you didn't pay your debt, then you might be given the pillory. I'm sure that in the church records, they have a record of what each punishment was for each law law against the church that they broke. Okay, and so anyway, here it says that the Jews. So we know that the Jews were involved in this as well. Here, if a man dies owing money to the Jews, here we see again, if a man dies owing money to the Jews, his wife may have her dower and pay nothing towards the debt from it. If he leaves children under age, their needs must be provided for. So the baron or the knight had to provide for the family until the children reached age where they were able to work on the farms. It says here, debts owed to persons other than Jews are to be dealt with similarly. Okay, so this would include kings or knights or barons, and obviously if you didn't pay your debts, you got given this torture. Now here I'm hearing everyone saying to me, hey, we've got to stand under Article 61 of the Magna Carta, and I'm warning you, this is the warning to you. When you stand under Magna Carta, this is what you're standing under. These are the people, and this is what you're standing under. These are the people that are in control of the Magna Carta, and you can't use one section without standing under the people responsible. Now, if you go to, I'm not going to go back, but if you go to our 1688 Bill of Rights, it tells you who is responsible for those rights. Well, it's the majesty as the instrument of God. And if you go to the preamble of the Magna Carta, it tells you who is responsible to enforce these laws. And the people responsible are the Catholic archbishops, the Jewish rabbis, and the kings that had no restrictions on them. So why would you stand under this section 61? And we've got people presently sending around petitions telling people to sign themselves under the barons. Now have a listen here. It says here, since we have granted all these things for God, so they see themselves as being above God, and for the better ordering of our kingdom, and to allay the discord that is between us and our barons, and since we desire that they shall be enjoyed in their entirety with lasting strength forever, we give and grant to the barons the following security. I'm not going to give them all. The barons shall elect 25 of their member to keep and cause to be observed with all their might the peace and liberties granted and confirmed to them. And here's the king at Runnymede signing up to the 25 barons. Well, the 25 barons, all this torture was carried out by the barons. So the barons are not innocent in all of this. Don't even think that they are, because they're not. They're all the people in this picture. Here you've got the you've got the religious leaders and the nobles, and here you've got the king, and here you've got the pope, and here you've got the 25 barons. They are all involved with doing this. So if you move forward, if we, our Chief Justice or officials, dishonour the Charter, the barons may, with the support of the whole community of the land, protest by seizing our castles, lands and possessions until it is corrected. I'm not going to read all of it, but you can read of it. But at no time will we prohibit man to take an oath to obey the commands of the 25 barons. So here's what they say. Here's what he's saying. He's saying we will not, I'll go to a green one, I think. He's saying we will not prohibit any man to take an oath or to obey the commands of the 25 barons. So this means the church leaders will not stop people from following the barons. But here's the kicker. They say, we give the public free permission to take this oath. Indeed, here's the kicker. We will compel any of our subjects who are unwilling to take it to swear it at our command. So what he's saying is if anybody doesn't obey the barons, we're going to force them and torture them and make them obey the barons. Ranked from highest to lowest, they include Duke, Marquess, Earl, Viscount, and Baron. This means that the Baron is the lowest title given on the totem pole. So whenever you hear in England about an Earl or a Viscount or a Baron or a Lord, they're talking about the Magna Carta system of leaders. That's what they're talking about. Okay, we're in a different realm. Okay, now here's the tortures. The 25 barons which shall swear to obey all the above articles faithfully, and shall cause them to be obeyed by others to the best of their power. Now, if you didn't obey the ecclesial leaders, you were punished, and if you didn't obey the barons, you were also punished. In this punishment here, no good talking about those African Americans. They're Americans, really. Those African Americans have got nothing. This was a torture here where they sat a naked man onto this kind of a horse thing, Maybe this was used for a horse thief or something. And you can see they did a lot of things up the bum. These ecclesial leaders just love abusing people, molesting people up the bum. And this is just true. So in this case, they would put the naked man and he would be sat. Every time he moved, one of these little gadgets here would go up his ass. Now, and they would put these weights over here onto his legs. See here, these weights would go, and he would sit there for hours. I mean, if you can imagine sitting on there for 3 days with these weights on your legs, you wouldn't be allowed to move. His arms would probably have been strung up. Lord knows what they use this thing here for. Someone might know about it. Over here, so it is accordingly our wish and command that the English church shall be free. So this is not you. This is the church that shall be free. That men in our kingdom shall have and keep all these liberties, rights in their entirety for them and their heirs, and us and our heirs in all things and all places forever. Now this document uses the word forever many times. And so it doesn't matter if you want to not have this document. It's there and it's used today, and the people in the higher realm live by this law. And the Pope goes by this law, and he's at the top of the ladder. He doesn't go, the Pope is, from my understanding, not under any laws. He is a man of his own laws established in this Magna Carta. The English prelates and clergy were very uncomfortable because they were torn between loyalty to the king as a secular ruler and between loyalty to the Pope, who was the spiritual overlord. So it says, we command you to give your advice on the said matters with the prelates and barons, whom we shall summon thither. Magna Carta 12:15. So here is a summary of the Magna Carta. Okay, it just says, 1, the church, the nobles, the barons, and their heirs have elected themselves to govern forever in perpetuity. The church, the nobles, would force the peons or the serfs to obey the barons forever. The barons, to the best, would force the peon serfs to obey the church. So the church would force the peons to obey the barons, and the barons would force the peons to obey the church and the nobles. So didn't matter which one you chose. If you wanted to be under the barons, you would be forced by them to follow the church. If you wanted to be under the church, you would be forced by them to follow the barons. Either way, you were screwed. The peons, serfs, children must pay debts of their parents in the event of death to the Jewish lords upon reaching age. So I'm not sure how, I am assuming that the rabbis were also included in the ecclesial leaders. And here, this is the only thing in the Magna Carta that was for the people. In return for protection, justice, and the right to cultivate good farmland for food, the people must work for free to the lords. So this is what you got. If you worked for nothing as a slave, you would get protection and justice, and you would get the right to cultivate land. If you didn't and you tried to leave the villages, they would attack you in the forest. So here's another picture from one of my little savage friends in New Zealand. There's many savages in New Zealand, and they love to come and help me. And this was a help that you can see here very clearly that it went from the king, but I would say also the Pope and the rabbi. And the rabbi. They've missed one because it was actually the Pope and the rabbi who appointed the king. The king had no power originally. He was appointed and they had all the power. And then he would give land to the nobles, and then the nobles would be able to manage that land. Now, they had to be people that were able to take care. They had to be very responsible. And then they would give their land to the knights. Now, what did the knights do? The knights would go out and fight, and they would pillage the land, and they would bring back the land, and they would give it to the nobles, and the nobles, well, it would all be given to the king. It would all be given to the Pope, and then the Pope would pass it down. And then for the land and protection would be the peasants who worked for free, and they would give the food and services. The knights would give the military service, and they would go and pillage for more lands, and then the money that was pillaged would go to the king, and then he would give most of it all the way up to the Pope. So these poor people down here obviously got nothing. So everybody, this is under the Magna Carta. Oh shit, not supposed to swear. This is going to be it. Now, under the glorious revolution that they fought, His Highness the Prince of Orange, who has pleased Almighty God to make the glorious instrument. So in this case, the king was only made an instrument. I have to go very fast now. And so in their preamble, they're going to say in their preamble, representing all the estates of the people. This is the first time that the word people has been used, and of this realm. On this day, the 13th of February, present their majesties, then known by the names of William and Mary, Prince and Princess of Orange. But the main thing here is that nowhere on here does it say that they will govern you forever. What it says is they will be the glorious instrument to deliver the kingdom of popery and arbitrary power. So they were put in place to get rid of this system and to get them out, including the barons. Now, what had happened was King James II was in power, and then they explained to you what he did wrong. One of the things was by the assistance of divers, which are nobles and people, evil counsellors, judges and ministers employed by him did endeavour to subvert and extirpate or get out the Protestant religion. So he wanted to now the Protestant religion I'm going to explain the Protestant later. It is not a Christian religion. Everybody thinks it's Christians, but it's actually not. Okay? So he tried to get them out. It says, it has pleased Almighty God to make the glorious instrument of delivering this kingdom from popery and arbitrary power. Did cause letters to be written to the Lord, spiritual and temporal being Protestants. And here's what a Protestant is. It is a member of any church, even if you believe that. Now, the New Zealand Maori believed that the sky was God and it was connected to the earth, who was also the God, which is Ranganui and Papanui. I can't really remember the name, but that would have been a religion, and that makes the New Zealand Maori Protestants, simply because it is. What does it mean to be a Protestant? Anybody that denies the universal authority of the Pope. Now, it's got here only Pope, but in fact, it is anyone that denies the worldly authority of any religious leader, because religious leaders are not supposed to preach about God. And some religious leaders want to rule the world, like the New World Order. And so anybody that is against the New World Order, doesn't matter if you are Jewish or if you're Catholic, any of is against a one power governing the entire world, then so you can be so there's only just that one piece. You can follow all of these sections, but there's that one piece that you can't follow, and that is that there would be a universal religious leader in the entire world. So that's what a Protestant is. And all of our natives, the American Indians, the New Zealand Maori, the Aboriginals, the Canadian First Nations people, they all are Protestant because they believed in their own godly gods taking care of them. They didn't believe even that one of their chiefs was in power over all of them. And that's why they had the separate tribes. So clearly, all of these tribes were Protestants, clearly. Now here it says, what else did the king do? King James II, by causing to be executed a commission under the Great Seal for erecting a court called the Court of Commissioners for Ecclesiastical Causes. They wanted to set up a court that would punish you for crimes against the church. Speaking against the church was a crime. You were tortured for that. Now, a few years ago, the United Nations has decided to incorporate a one world religion, and they're calling this the Noahide Laws. It's called the 7 Noahide Laws. Now, I would urge all of you to go to Google and look up here, I'll try and write it because I haven't got a pen, deception. It's called Deception of the Noahide Laws. Now, if you go to Google and you Google Deception of the Noahide Laws, you're going to understand why these laws are against our Protestant people. I'll just call Protestant people because you don't have to be a Protestant, you don't need to have a religion. You can be even an atheist and be a Protestant. So please go and look up, it's called the Deception of the Noahide Laws. Now here you see the Pope and the Rabbi joining forces, and in my opinion, all the way back to Magna Carta, these two groups have always been working together. I don't think they've ever been working against each other, in my opinion. Probably get my head chopped off. Now, in 1989, I've put both of the Bushes here. We've got George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr. And I've put both of them because I don't know which one did it. But in 1989, most Americans don't even know that their Declaration of Independence was changed, and a holiday wasn't. It says this was written by George Bush. The principles of moral and ethical conduct that have formed the basis for all civilizations come to us in part from the centuries, talking about the Magna Carta, centuries-old 7 Noahide laws. The Noahide laws are actually 7 commandments given to man by God. Now, that is in their opinion, because in their opinion, that you see the Magna Carta where they say they gave their laws to God of what they wanted. From my limited knowledge of religion, they believe that God gives the law to the papal and the Judaists and the Islamic leaders, and then those leaders then pass the laws down to us, and they believe that we cannot get our laws directly from God. But in our glorious liberation, we say our laws are directly from Almighty God, and He lets the monarch be the glorious instrument. So, and given by God as recorded in the Old Testament. And this follows the Old Testament. These commandments include, that they make it sound lovely, prohibitions against murder, robbery, adultery, blasphemy, and greed, as well as the positive order to establish the courts of justice. Courts of justice are the courts that they had back in previously in the Magna Carta, where if you broke any of these laws against the church, so if you broke a law of blasphemy against the church, you would go to the court of justice, and they will punish you according to the laws that they make. Through the leadership of Rabbi Menachem Schneerson and the worldwide Lubavitch movement, the Noahide laws and standards conduct duly derived from them have been promulgated around the globe. Now, they're trying to sign all of our countries up to these laws. The Lubavitch movement, as we have shown, teaches that the 7 Noahide laws are applicable only to all non-Jews. So if you're an atheist, or if you're a Christian, or it doesn't matter what you are, but from what I've been told, the Catholics, the Islamists, and the Judaist rabbis all follow these 7 laws. They made a pact together that they were going to follow these 7 laws and join hands in a movement against the Christians and against the 1688, and that the Jews of the world are obliged to enforce the laws. So this means that they have given themselves power. If you break any of their laws, so if you break the law of blasphemy here, if you speak against their leader or break the law, then any Jew, it doesn't say they have to be a judge, any Jew or any of the ecclesial leaders of the world are obliged to enforce the laws. And it says, thou shalt establish laws and courts of law to administer these laws, including the death penalty. Violation of any one of the 7 laws subjects all of us, including Maori, American Indians, the Aboriginals of Australia, the First Nation people in Canada, we are all called Noachites. And if we, under the 7 Noahide laws that the UN has incorporated, and it's also included in the Declaration of Indigenous Rights, the Declaration of Indigenous Rights, and they are subjected to capital punishment by decapitation. And here's the kicker. The Jews say that these laws are given to Noah by their God for the orderly government of all people. This is why they want the 1688 gone, and this is why they want you to stand under Section 61 of the Magna Carta. But the Jews, here's the funny thing, the Jews were given another set of laws, and so were the Catholics, and so were the Islamists, because the Islamists believe that no Muslim can kill another Muslim, and the Catholics believe the same, and the Jews believe that no Jew can kill another Jew. But if you're not a Jew, they can kill you. Isn't this a cool law that they've got here? If you blaspheme, you can be decapitated by any one of us. But if we blaspheme, that's all right, because we'll get a different punishment. They have different punishments that do not include death. The Jews were given another set of laws, so they are not subject to the Noahide laws. If the Noahide is guilty of murder, he must pay the death penalty, or guilty of idolatry. Idolatry means that you worship any alternative religion that doesn't believe in this. If you don't believe in this hierarchy here, then you are in violation of their idolatry laws. Okay, the penalty for breaking the law is death by decapitation. And at the same time, the Jews themselves are under the Talmudic laws and not the Noahide laws, they say. Thus, they can violate they are allowed to violate the Noahide laws if they want, especially if it is against a Noahide. So we are all called Noachites. We used to be called peon slaves. And after that, we were called laborers. They've given us all these new names. After that, we were called laborers because they thought it sounded better. And then now we are called Noachites, apparently. And in the 1688 Bill of Rights, it then goes on to say that King James II was guilty by causing several good subjects, being Protestants. He caused them to be disarmed. He forced them to give up all of their weapons. But at the same time, the papists were both armed and employed, which was contrary to a law. So they must have had some laws. Now, this is what they're doing in all of our countries. They're taking away all our guns, and they have placed all of their people in strategic positions. We have to hurry along. Whereas, you might have to watch this again later. It's going to be a long video. I'm just going to do it all in one video because it's too hard to separate the videos. But you can come back and watch later if you get tired. And whereas the late years partial, corrupt, and unqualified persons have been returned and served on juries. So they were putting in people that were unqualified to serve in the juries, which were not people like you and me, but they were putting their leaders in power on the juries to make punishments over the normal people of the land. And in trials for high treason, which were not freeholders. Okay, so, and then it goes on, it says, whereas the late King James II, having abdicated his government, so King James gets thrown out. So he's out for breaking all those laws. And then Prince Orange comes in and it says, whom it has pleased Almighty God to make the glorious instrument of delivering the kingdom from popery and arbitrary power. And then it goes on to say, these are the subjects' rights. Now, everybody needs to understand that we were subjects in two instances of history. In the first instance of history, we were subjects under this system. And in the second, and this system. And in the second instance of history, we are now going on, and this is where we put in a new monarch. And this is what I'm saying to you, that even if the monarch, even if you don't like her, even if you want them out, if the entire monarchy was corrupted, and if we needed to put them out, we would still need to put in a high-up leader to keep our 1688 Bill of Rights in place. If you remove the monarchy and you don't put anything in its place as an instrument of God, then we lose all of these rights that we've got. And so here are our rights. So it is imperative that we either keep Her Majesty the Queen in there, because as long as she's there, even if she's corrupted, even if you don't like her, as long as she's there, we've got these rights. Or if they're removed, we lose these rights, or if they're removed, then we need to put a different monarch in her place to hold up the rights. So those are our three options. Standing under the Magna Carta is not an option. Now, the Glorious Revolution, and they rose up, and jointly William and Mary would be Protestants, and they had to be Protestants to protect our rights. Now, it goes on to say a Protestant is a member of any church denominations denying the universal authority of the Pope or other religious leaders, such as Islamic or Talmudic, Jewish, and affirming the Reformation principles of the justification by faith alone and the primacy of the Bible, which is King James Bible, as the only source. Jacinda Ardern says she's the only source of truth. Our only source of truth is in the King James Bible. And what they've said was, we want equality. Now, let me just explain here. This law here in the 1688 Bill of Rights is not saying that other religions are excluded. What it's saying is that they can't govern over us simply because they have the Magna Carta forever, and their governance requires, under their governance, we are required to follow laws that are unhealthy. We're going to be dead under their laws. So we haven't said to them, you can't have your laws. You can have your laws if you want them. But we have created another set of laws that we can live under to protect us from your laws. So if all of you want to go under our laws, that is fine, but we cannot have you, these religions governing over us because of the danger to our lives. It's got nothing to do with equality in religions. We cannot be equal in their religion, because their religion demands that they decapitate us if we speak against them. And this is why for 400 years they fought against the Magna Carta. He says here, this is in the 1688 Bill of Rights, that the pretended power of suspending laws, that's going on now, or the execution of laws by regal authority without consent of Parliament is illegal. So now you need to have consent of Parliament. That ecclesial courts are illegal. Now, if you go back here to the courts of justice that they want to have, they want to establish courts of justice. Where did I say it? They want to establish here. They want to establish the courts of justice to enforce these Noahide laws, with us being. And then under our 1688, this would be considered to be an ecclesiastical court, and it would be illegal under our 1688. And the Commission for erecting the late Court of Commissioners for ecclesiastical causes and all other commissions, it says here, all other commissions and courts of like nature, so this is courts of justice, are illegal. And this is why nobody wants you to remember the 1688 Bill of Rights. These are our rights under the 1688. First, that the subjects' arms which are Protestants may have arms for their defence, suitable to their conditions and as allowed by law. We are entitled to have arms, but Protestants. Why does it only say Protestants? Well, they want to decapitate us with their arms. They want to torture us with their arms. But Protestants, we want to use our weapons to protect ourselves against them. The next right, the right to petition. It is the right of the subjects to petition the king, and all prosecutions for such petitioning is illegal. Now, I'm going to tell you something here. The right to petition the Queen was removed from New Zealand. It's an illegal removal because these 1688 Bill of Rights are forever, and that was illegal for them because we've lost our right. It's no good petitioning the Governor-General because the Governor-General, we have lost. If we want to petition against these rights, I think our only way that we can do it is to petition against New Zealand, removing our right to petition Her Majesty the Queen, because we are supposed to be. Now, it's important that you understand here, this word here, subject. As a subject, you are a majesty as an instrument of God. And so it's very important that we remain subjects, all of us. Whether you're Maori, whether you're Aboriginal, whether you're an American Indian, we are all subjects, and that entitles us to these rights. So we're entitled to petition the Queen. So this tells us who we go to if our rights. You're all going to the wrong people. You're petitioning to the highest order of the lands of the Commonwealth country. Are 15 countries left, and this is who we need to be petitioning, not for stupid things. You can't petition the Queen about COVID-19. You only can petition Her Majesty if our rights are not being honoured. So you have to know what the rights are. The election of members of Parliament must be free, and I feel that our elections have been rigged, and they're not. That duly impanelled and returned. So this just says that we have the right to elections. It says here, it says excessive bail, but the main point is here, you should have no cruel and no unusual punishments to be inflicted. If you see over here, the ecclesial leaders of the past like to put things up people's bums, and they would tie them up. Now, if our Majesty is not there, or if ever the monarch is not there, and if ever, and looking at the Maoris, if ever the monarch is not there, this right here is removed from you, and they are going to be able to go back to these rights here. As long as the monarch is there, they can never enforce these Noahide laws at the UN. But if they can get the monarch out, like they're doing in New Zealand, they're doing it in Australia, they're doing it in Canada, and they're doing it in America as well. And if they can America is lucky because America's got the Declaration of Independence, but New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, we don't. We've only got the monarch. So this is why it's so important. Freedom of speech, that the freedom of speech and debates or proceedings, a lot of people get confused with this because they say it's only for in Parliament, but it says the freedom of speech and debates or proceedings in Parliament ought not to be impeached or questioned in any court or any place outside of Parliament. So this is just, it's got two here. You've got two whammies here. Here it's number one is talking about freedom of speech and debates. And then here it's number two is talking about in Parliament. And if you remember in the last bit of the Magna Carta, one of the torture instruments was called the gossip instrument. And if you spoke against the church, the same with the Noahide laws, you would go to the courts of justice. These are the courts of justice that they're talking about. They're evil. Courts of justice are evil. We go to courts of law for you. We don't go to courts of justice because they against speaking against their papal leaders. And so you lose your freedom of speech, and this is why we have to protect. Now, if you look in here in the Magna Carta, this is the Magna Carta. These are all the people and their descendants forever that are going to have power over you. That includes the royal family of today. Even Prince Harry, Prince William, they all still come under this Magna Carta. And they have their power, but we over here, and it says that we have granted to God to be confirmed for our heirs in perpetuity. Over here it says, whom it has pleased Almighty God to use the glorious revolution, the glorious instrument, and there are no names. Can't see any names here. It's got the Prince of Orange, however, and it goes on to say his descendants. But in the 1688, at the end of it, it actually says, it explains to you, if the monarch is not doing their duty of protecting your rights, it explains how they can be removed. You've got to remove them and put in another monarch that will protect our rights. Whereas in the Magna Carta, for the people, you're governed by all of these people here forever in perpetuity. And there's no way for the people to protect the kingly leaders, and the kingly leaders protect the barons, and the people have got nobody to go to if they have a problem. So these are the liberties to be allowed by the force of a law made in due form by the authority of Parliament. And we're talking about law. We're not talking about law. Now, under the natural law, they are going to have ecclesiastical leaders and courts of justice. But under our Parliament, we have courts of law. Do pray that it might be declared and enacted that all and singular the rights and liberties asserted and claimed in the said declaration are the true, ancient, and indubitable rights and liberties of the people of this kingdom, and so shall be esteemed, allowed, adjudged, deemed, and taken to be, and that all and every particulars aforesaid shall be firmly and strictly held and observed as they are expressed in this declaration, which means under this law, the United Nations and the Declaration of Indigenous Rights, it is a fallacy, a fake, and it's against our laws from God. The supremacy, this is what the Queen has to say. I do swear that I do from my heart abhor, detest, and abjure as the impious and heretical, this damnable doctrine and position that you have to read this carefully, that princes or deprived by the Pope or any authority of the See of Rome may be deposed or murdered by their subjects. So I'll just explain that. It means that if anybody said anything against the Pope's subjects of the Magna Carta would be permitted to murder them in these heinous ways. And this is no different from the Noahide laws that they've incorporated at the UN and instituted in America, where they have said here that the Jews, it says here, the Jews of the world are obliged to enforce these laws. This is the same as the subjects. In this instance, these Jews are the subjects of the leaders of the Noahide laws, and they are permitted to go out into the world and enforce their justice on us. And this is against our 1688 Bill of Rights for them to do that. And it says it in the oath, and it says they are not allowed to do that anymore. And I do declare that no foreign prince, that means no, in New Zealand, we're being governed by Mexicans, Iranians, Samoans, Eritreans, and all of those people are illegal in our government under the 1688 Bill of Rights, and that's why they've removed it, and they've removed the Queen. Do declare that no foreign prince, no person, no prelate, no state or potentate has or ought to have any jurisdiction, any power, any superiority, preeminence or authority or ecclesiastical or spiritual within this realm. So help me God. So the Noahide laws are absolutely illegal in any of our countries. But they've signed Australia up, they've signed America up, and they've signed the Indigenous people up through the Declaration of Indigenous Rights. And by signing the Indigenous people up with the of Indigenous rights, they've actually dragged us in to their Noahide laws, and they've superseded our 1688 Bill of Rights laws of what they've done. And what they're doing is decolonisation, is they're giving the entire countries, Australia, they're doing the New Zealanders first, they're giving the entire country back to the natives, and then and they're making the natives the leaders of our country. And they're setting up a Maori parliament as we speak, and they're making the Maori king the absolute king. And as the absolute king, he then comes, because they've appointed him, he was appointed, and he then becomes, he's up here. Here's the Maori king up here. And we go back to this system of what we were all under. And under the Maori king and the Indigenous, Declaration of Indigenous Rights, under these, because I'll show you what they've done with our treaty in a minute. You'll see how they've done it. It's a long video. So these are, what is a potentate? Some people don't know. It says here a potentate or a prelate. And so a potentate is a ruler who has a lot of power, especially one whose power is not limited. And a prelate is a high-ranking member of the clergy who is called an ordinary. And what are the Maoris called? Ordinaries. Or who ranks in precedence with ordinaries. And New Zealand has got an absolute Maori king. Now, I'll tell you about that. In the 1600s, when they our countries. Now, I'm going to tell you why the New Zealand Maori king is a danger to our monarchy. When they went out to these countries, these religious leaders, they set up 3 kings. From one king was in South Africa, and one king was to the north of New Zealand. And I've just recently found out that there were 2 treaties signed in New Zealand, one for the north and one for the south. And they've set up a king in the north. Now, these 2 kings in South Africa, they used to, one in New Zealand and one in South Africa, they were absolute kings, right? And under an absolute king, you come under the Magna Carta. Under the monarch, you come under the Bill of Rights with all your rights. And what they've done in New Zealand is they tried it with the ecclesial leaders when the Magna Carta was fizzled out by the 1688 Bill of Rights and the new monarch. They all went out to each of these countries and started setting up kingdoms, and they were planning 200 years ahead. And a battle went on in each of our countries, especially in New Zealand and especially in America, where it was the religious leaders fighting against the monarchical leader. That was the battle that went on in America, and the battle also went on in New Zealand. And what happened was in New Zealand that they moved in and signed the treaty. And then about a couple of years after the treaty was signed, a triumvirate was set up, which I'm not going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about later. But anyway, they set up a king. The papal leaders set up kings in New Zealand and Africa. The Africa king fizzled out. He became a dictator leader, and there's a problem with him why he couldn't do it. But they've got a Maori king who isn't. So we've got our monarch who is in charge of 15 countries, and the 1688 Bill of Rights, which is against the Magna Carta, and the New World Order cannot function under it. And now they've set up this Maori king who's an absolute leader. And if they get him into power, they're going to make him the leader of all the indigenous people. He's going to be the king of the Aboriginals in Australia. He's going to be the king of the Indians in America. He's going to be the king of the First Nations people in Canada, and he's going to be the king of the people in Africa. Anybody that comes into the Declaration of Indigenous Rights is going to be led by the Maori king, the absolute king, who is under his puppet masters, is who he's under. And there's the puppet masters. Now, in the Magna Carta, the papers are debarred from the crown. And whereas it has been found by experience that it is inconsistent. So what they're saying is that it is inconsistent with the safety and the welfare of this Protestant kingdom to be governed by a popish prince or an Islamic prince or a Judaist rabbi. It is inconsistent for our safety and our welfare. So they're not against those religions. They're not saying you can't have those religions, but they're saying you can't govern us because you're too dangerous for us. The Lord's spiritual temple and commons do further pray that it be enacted that all and every person that shall hold, anybody that holds communion with the see or the Church of Rome, or shall profess the popish religion, or shall marry a papist, shall be excluded. Now, this law was changed in New Zealand in 2015, I think it was, or maybe 1987. They removed, they actually changed the Bill of Rights in New Zealand, which is illegal in itself. And from what I can gather, they also changed it in England at some point in the 1800s that said that the popes and the papal Catholics could rule in our parliaments. Now, they shouldn't have done it, and now we see in the no-hide laws. So the Crown government in this realm and island and the dominions, so we were a dominion thereunto belonging, or any part of the same, exercise the regal power, authority, jurisdiction within the same. And so all and such people are absolved of their allegiance. We are absolved of our allegiance to any religious leaders. We do not have to be allegiant to the Pope. We do not have to be allegiant to the Islamists. We do not have to be allegiant to the Judaists. But under their Noahide laws, we have to, or we will be decapitated. So that's why this is so important. Now, I didn't fix these. I don't know if you can see it, but I can't make it any bigger. But anyway, this is the punishment that we would receive by the church if we did anything against the church. They would put these things. Now, you often see people laughing about this because it was white people. If they were black people and you laughed at them, there'd be a big hoo-ha. Here's another case under the Magna Carta, the popes, and under the barons. See, this is what the barons used to do. So you don't want to stand under the barons. Here's another case. Here you can see the church here, and you can see him on the wheel of going around and around. And so this was also under the barons. Here we go here. They would put people into cages and hold them in there. Now, the African Americans have got nothing on what the white English and what the Irish, what all of our ancestors had to. Why aren't we being compensated for all of this? In this case, the man was stretched. Now, these are all white people. In this case, they would put a pole through the man that would bypass his organs out his, I think they put it up his ass. He would be alive. This man would have been alive. And they put the pole up his ass here, and it goes through his body and out here, and then he would have been put on this pole and either burned or just left there to die a slow death. In this case here, they would tie him up on this wheel with his legs spread, and God only knows what they did to the poor man. But usually they would do something. Here we can see the lady who has violated the law of law. We're talking about L-O-R-E. This is law. These were the punishments that were dished out under law. And due to the 1688 Bill of Rights and Parliament, they created law. Here, and under law, they said that the people, the Parliament and the courts were responsible if they hurt us. And if they hurt us, they had to pay compensation. So that's why you want to be under law, because if they do anything to hurt you while you're in police custody, you can go and prosecute them. Now, under the natural law, there is, if they harm you like this in some decision that they've made, you cannot go back and prosecute them for doing that, because under their law, in this case, she spoke against the church. And so the punishment for speaking against the church was to have this placed over her mouth for so long, okay? In this case, you see here that a lot of people are laughing, and people go to these things and they think it's amusing. In actual fact, it was not amusing. Behind them, people would stick things up their bottoms. People would pull their genitals. they would pull their pants off and leave them standing there naked, is what they do. This is not a funny thing here. People would go up and pinch them on the nose, spit on them, vomit on them, all of these things. It was a cruel, cruel punishment. And you can see here, oh, what have we got here? Oh, and here we've got the Jewish star. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what's the Jewish star? It goes like this, and then it goes like this, there. And so is that the Jewish star there, the triangle on the triangle? And anyway, these laws were horrendous. Here we've got him here in the back. Now, he would go into the stocks and he would be whipped. Here's the man whipping him. He had to stand in here. In this case here, this is in Australia, actually. And funnily enough, as I was going through, I'll just quickly tell you, funnily enough, how they've got all these pictures of the same period of time of all of these black people being beaten. And I'll tell you something about the same period of time. There is not a single picture of all of the white people that were whipped and beaten. And they can't tell me that there was no photography back then, because how come they've got photographs of the Aborigines, they've got photographs of the Maori, they've got photographs of the African Americans being, they haven't got any photographs of the white people that were beaten in Australia and beaten in New Zealand and beaten in Canada and in America, and they suffered horrible. They were beaten just as much, but you them, oh no, because apparently they're white and they should just put up with it. Here we have a woman being beaten by I don't know, and all the people are watching. Here we have another man. This is in America. You can know he was in America because he's wearing this hat here. He was one of the religious leaders that was beating a white man that wanted to follow the Queen, maybe. Maybe he wanted to be under his 1688 Bill of Rights. And then this man here, who might have been a Mormon, or he might have been a Jehovah's Witness, and he said, no, that's illegal under their Noahide laws, and he got beaten. So this was the Prince of Orange, the King's assent, which are the majesties are contented and pleased, shall be declared, enacted, and established by authority of this present Parliament, and shall stand, remain, and be the law of this realm for everyone. Now, everyone, don't be angry. I'm just going to do this in one video, and I'm not stopping. So, between 1960 and 1986, all of our countries have had our constitutions removed, and so that we go under the Maori absolute king of all nations, the Queen. And this man here is called Manuka Hanari. And let me tell you, you must remember this name, Manuka Hanari. He's passed away now. He was the executive officer of the Catholic Commission for Justice, Peace and Development. He worked for an organisation. He was the director of an organisation called Caritas, and they've renamed our country. They renamed New Zealand Aotearoa, and we are currently working under two sets of laws. Sometimes we're working under this set of laws, which are called Aotearoa laws, and sometimes we're working under this set of laws. The Aotearoan laws are based on the absolute Maori king and the Magna Carta, and the New Zealand laws are based on the 1688, and they've tried in a sneaky way to trick us into believing that we have our parliament as New Zealand, when in fact they've got this secret government going on behind our backs. And this man here, he was one of several, it's got here, have a read here. He was one of several Maori Catholic leaders who helped the church deepen their understanding and its responsibility to the commitment to the Tiriti o Waitangi. Now, I want you to understand something. We have got this Treaty of Waitangi, and the Treaty of Waitangi is not the Tiriti o Waitangi. They are two different laws. The Treaty of Waitangi comes under New Zealand and the 1688 Bill of Rights, but the Tiriti o Waitangi comes under here. And so New Zealand is functioning under two laws, and I'm going to show you exactly. And it was all the man that translated the Tiriti o Waitangi. What they did is they took the English treaty and he translated the Maori version back to English. And when he translated it back to English, he came up with this thing called the Tiriti o Waitangi. And I'm going to show you now. I want you to remember back here is very, very, very important that you understand when I'm talking about subjects, I'm talking about these subjects, and I'm not talking about these subjects, okay? So under the Magna Carta, it's very important that you remember this word subjects, okay? So let's get down here a bit. Let me see here. So I want to show you here. It says here in the he translated this thing was called the whakaputanga. There was an original in 1835 of a whakaputanga, and this was done in 1835. Now, previous to 1835, New Zealand was a state of New South Wales. And under New South Wales, we were protected by the 1688 as subjects. And what had happened was some religious leaders from the Pope set up some Marist priests to go out into all of the countries. And they turned up in New Zealand. And they got a few of the Maori chiefs, and they got the Maori chiefs to, well, they didn't. They took a young Maori leader, and they had him live in a molestation sexual relationship with some church leaders. And when he was about 20 years old, they got him to write a Declaration of Independence. And as soon as they wrote the Declaration of Independence, they were no longer under the protection of New South Wales. So anyway, needless to say, it's not a bad Declaration of Independence, as long as you follow the English version. In the English version, it's only in the first section that they use the word we, okay? So in the first section, they use the word we, but in all the other sections, it is written primarily by Busby. It says, we, the hereditary chiefs and heads of tribes. So we've got here hereditary chiefs and heads of tribes, and then it also, and then I want to show you over here, look over here, it says, we, the absolute leaders. Now this, we, the absolute leaders of the tribes. Now, this was written by, oh, I don't like that colour purple. It's yucky, isn't it? I'll use red. So this was written by Manuka Hanari in around about, it doesn't say, but it was written between the years of the 1970s and 80s. and I'm not sure when it was published, but I'm going to put here, let's say 1980. So he changed it from hereditary chiefs and the heads of tribes to the absolute leader of the tribes. And you'll find out in the next bit. And then it also goes on to be different because it says, we declare the independence of our country, which is hereby constituted and declared to be an independent state. This means that they want to break away from New South Wales. But it's very different over here. He says, here we want to be an independent. Here they say, we declare the authority and leadership of our country. So it's very clear in the first section here, and here, that they're using the hereditary chiefs and all of the tribes. But over here, we don't know who they're talking about. It only says the absolute leaders of the tribes. So who are they? Are they hereditary? Are they the heads of the tribes? We don't know. It just simply says the absolute leaders of the tribes. And in the year 2000, that could be anyone. It could be the Pope, for all we know. Now, here it says the independence of our country. But over here, independence of our country, over here it says declare the authority and leadership of our country, which is very different. And hereby declare ourselves to be an independent state. Well, it doesn't say that here. It says we want authority over you. And we're going to have leadership over you. Okay? And it says, and we declare to them. Who is them? That's us, Maori-Pians. That's us that are not in their magna carta system. We are the slaves. So we are them, and they give to us a prosperous economy and a chiefly country. So there's not even the word independent. And this is what it means when they talk about te wakamina ngā hapu o New Tarini. They're talking about them as the absolute leaders and their authority and their leadership over you. And you no longer have any power. In the second article, I hope I'm not going to make this too long, right? We're coming up. I have to move fast. In the second article, I'm not going to read it all sovereign power and authority within the territories of the United Tribes of New Zealand is hereby declared to reside entirely, exclusively in the hereditary chiefs and heads of tribes, and it says in their collective capacity. So that means all chiefs are to govern together, is what it says. But in Manuka's translation, he says the sovereignty and the kingship is with the kingitanga. And this is the absolute king. Now, you other countries, Australia, Canada, might not think this matters, but we have got an absolute king, the UN Declaration of Indigenous Rights. I'm going to show you later the absolute Maori king that they've chosen. And he says, are here declared, and the mana from the land of Confederation of New Zealand are here declared to belong solely to the true leaders. Well, who is the true leader? Here we've got chiefs in their collective capacity, and here we've got a sovereignty, a kingship, a kingitanga, and we've got power. All power resides in the true leaders, of whom we don't know who they are. They don't tell you of our gathering, and we also declare nothing more to go on there. And then it talks about they, themselves, and their. So it looks like Busby, it looks like Erawa, the Maori chief, wrote this bit because it talks about we, but after that it speaks in the third person as if Busby wrote it himself for them. And whereas if you look over here, they continue to use us, and they're talking about our, and they're talking about their absolute king. So what I'm trying to say to you is that, what I'm trying to say to you, I'll just let you look, is that by Manuka Hanari, he has written a new declaration that when they're talking about the whakaputanga, they're not talking about the English whakaputanga where all of the tribes have power. He's talking about the new translated version where you have an absolute king in power. That's what he's talking about. And so he has written an entirely new document. And then here it says, we the hereditary chiefs and heads of tribes agree to meet in Congress. However, here once again, here he's used the. He uses that and he doesn't use we, but here they've used we again, the true leaders. Who are the true leaders? It's going to be interesting to know who are the true leaders. And he says, we the true leaders agree to meet in a formal gathering. So what he's saying here, you can see the difference. We're going to meet in Congress, which is a parliament, for the purpose of framing laws for the dispensation of justice and the preservation of good. And he says, but over here, we're going to, this is different because he says, we're going to enact laws. So this basically means that these leaders here are going to make the laws. And then they're going to have a formal meeting with the people across New Zealand. And then they're going to enact the laws that they have decided to give you. Whereas here, they're going to frame laws in a Congress of Parliament. So there's very different what they're talking about here. And if we go down to the next one, I'm just going to show you the differences here. We the hereditary chiefs and the heads of tribes in the English, we're the absolute leaders of the tribes. This means they have absolute and all power over all Maori people and New Zealand people. The English version, we declare the independence of our country. Manuka's version, we declare the authority and leadership of our country. So once again, he's bringing in this absolute law. The United Tribes of New Zealand, he's used a confederation, sacred confederation of tribes. So we don't know, this may be the absolute leaders here. It doesn't necessarily mean the united group of tribes. It may just only mean the sacred confederation may only be the absolute leaders. All sovereign power and authority to reside entirely and exclusively in the hereditary chiefs and the heads of tribes in their collective capacity. This is the English version. However, and it says here collective, and they must be hereditary. And there's no hereditary in Manuka's version. So this means that the leaders that you have do not need to inherit their leadership. Anybody can become your leader of your country under his translation. In the English translation, the only ones that are allowed to govern your New Zealand country, listen carefully, under the English version, the only people allowed to govern New Zealand under the English version must be hereditary, which means they must be born to New Zealand by New Zealand people. Under the Manuka translation, there are no hereditary chiefs, and that means that from any country can come and take the chieftainship of your country. So this is why you don't want to follow this. They're calling it Te Wake Minenga o Ngā Hapu o Uterini. You don't want to follow this because the absolute leaders don't even have to be a New Zealander. They can be from the freaking moon. So that's why you can't follow Manuka's translation. In the next bit, the sovereignty kingship, kingitanga, would belong solely to the true leaders. Once again, the true leader could be the man from the moon. Doesn't even have to be a Maori. Nowhere on there does it say that it has to be a Maori. So it might be a Maori at first. When you first get your Maori government and your Maori king, it might be a Maori, but later your children's children's children may not have a Maori. They might have a Samoan king or an Indian king or an Egyptian king or a papal king. Possibly a papal king. And so this is why this whole thing has got to be knocked on the head right now. In the English version, the hereditary chiefs, that means they have to be born to New Zealand. The hereditary chiefs and heads of tribes agree to meet in Congress. This is Parliament of Waitangi. And here we go again. He says the true leaders have agreed to meet in a formal gathering at Waitangi. So they've cut out Parliament. And so you see here, all the way down here, they are confirming their absolute rule. Now, to show, have I missed a bit here? I can't see it all, but it says to show, let's see. Okay, let me just look here for a minute. In the English version, I'm not going to read it all, but here he gives, he says that we're going to, all right, here he says that we're going to write to the King of England to thank him for the acknowledgement of their flag. But here they've changed it. He said, we agree that a copy of our declaration should be written and sent to the King of England. Now, this is very important, and you'll find out later. You see this word here, majesty. Whenever you see any document signed and sealed by the monarch, they must use this word here, majesty. And you might not realize it, but this word here, majesty, only applies when you use the word majesty and you use the word king together. then you're talking about a monarch that is in power over either many countries or entire countries or several realms. That's why you use majesty. But it's different. You'll notice that previously they never used for the Maori king. He was only called Maori king. Hold the word of majesty because he was not the king of the whole country. He was only the king of his tribe, his one tribe. And so he didn't get the word majesty. But recently he was given the word majesty, and they've changed him to be a majestic king. Now, it's important that you look here. I'll show you the definition of majesty in a minute. But you'll see here that they've only used King of England. A king can be anybody. There are many kings, but there is only one majestic king. And it has to say majesty on any documents. It says King of England to express our appreciation for this approval of our flag. Well, which King of England did they send it to? It doesn't say they sent it to the Majesty. So they could have actually sent this document in 1987 to a person that they called King of England, and he may have given them approval for the flag that they're currently flying in New Zealand. And that's why, to all the other countries, if anybody's listening, in New Zealand they're flying this flag called it's called the Declaration flag or something, but it's not our New Zealand flag. And they're trying to say that this flag had the approval of the king, and I'm suspicious that the flag does in fact have the approval of the king, but it doesn't necessarily mean the Majesty King. It could be they could have just sent this translated document by him. He could have just sent it to England in 1986 and had a king that they appointed in England to sign it, and then that would be signed by the King of England for the approval of the new flag that they're flying all over New Zealand. So that is very interesting. And what you have to look at is that they have changed the word subjects from the English word, and they've put in this word Pākehā. And what they are saying, that Pākehā means anybody that is not born, anybody that is not born to New Zealand is a Pākehā. It is significant because this is the first connection that the English people and the Scottish people and the Irish people in New Zealand, this is the first connection that they are actually subjects of the Queen under the Bill of Rights and protection. They are protected as subjects by Her Majesty as subjects. And in the translation that he did in 1986, he's removed all of the white New Zealanders as subjects. And once again, he's using our, we, us, our. And here, Busby is using they and their. And once again, Busby says that he will become its protector. So he's asked His Majesty to become the protector from all attempts upon its independence. Here it says, we ask the king, they haven't used Majesty, we ask the king to remain as protector. Well, that might be the Pope for all we know, for us in our state. And here they've reasserted, lest our authority and leadership be ended. So I'm not saying that the Pope is the king that they're referring to, but if, let's call him the Peter, okay, let's call him Pop. So if the Pop was the imaginary king that he's got, he would be the protector to stop their leadership, which is the kingitanga, the absolute leaders, from ever being ended. And so here is something interesting, because this is, now I'm going to talk about, this is Geoffrey Palmer, okay? And he is the one, now in I have to change my pen. In 1986, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, from what I know, all lost their constitutions. We had a constitution of 1852. And it's just interesting to me that on February 24th of 1986, Her Majesty the Queen, here is David Lang, this man here, David Lang, or they call him David Longy. So here's David Longy, or Lang, whatever they call him. And I'm not sure, but is this Geoffrey Palmer here? It might be. And funnily enough, here's something strange. We in New Zealand had the 1852 Constitution, which made us all, the entire country of New Zealand, were subjects under her monarch. Under the monarch, we were subjects. And in 1986, in February, we can see the Queen comes to New Zealand. And we see a big newspaper article was made saying, farewelling the Queen. Now, I didn't write that. That's in a newspaper article. They said, farewelling the Queen. And then if you go to here, in November, let me have a look with my paper. In November of 1986, this was in November, the Pope comes to New Zealand in November. And he meets here with Geoffrey Palmer. And he meets here with, I think he's the Governor General of the time, who is actually an Indian Fijian. And for some reason, oh no, I don't think it was him, but I'm not sure who he is. But anyway, Geoffrey Palmer in 1986, the Pope comes shortly after the Queen. And then, after that, I'll just go back. After that, in December, where am I? I've got them mixed up. Then in December of 1986, our 1852 Constitution was removed in the middle of the night by two parties with no referendum. Both parties sat down and they just decided in the middle of the night that they're going to remove our 1852 Constitution. And they gave us, now Australia's Constitution was removed, Canada's Constitution was removed, America's Declaration of Rights was changed by George Bush to apartheid laws, and England's Constitution was removed, and New Zealand ended up with an unwritten constitution. Who the hell is a constitution? England ended up with an unwritten constitution, and Israel ended up with an unwritten constitution. And I'm going to do that in the next class. I'm going to stop this now. I was going to do the treaty I've got the Treaty of Waitangi, but I'm going to do it next in another video tomorrow. Okay, so we're going to stop it here. But anyway, these are what laws that we all as go through. The 1852 Constitution was replaced by the 1986 unwritten Constitution. The 1688 Bill of Rights was replaced, call it the BOR, under Her Majesty, under the monarch. That was replaced in 1990 by the New Zealand Bill of Rights. The Declaration of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People was brought in 2010, and what they did is they took all the Indigenous people of all of our countries and they put them under this Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, and they took them out of this. They've all been removed, and I'll show you next time because it's too long. The Universal Declaration of, and they've been now put under, and through removing all of the Indigenous people from the 1688 and putting them under this rights here and this rights here, they've actually removed all of us English people or settlers. We've all been removed from our rights as well, because if they put us under the absolute leaders, under the decolonisation movement, because they're saying under decolonisation, all the land and the leadership has to be given back to the native people. And the native people are no longer protected under this. The native people are now under this and the Noahide laws. And if we are governed by them, by the native people, then we are no longer under our rights. So they've dragged us in to their laws, even though we don't want to be. Now, in New Zealand, they've come up with this thing called He Puapua, where they're going to give the absolute rule of New Zealand to the Indigenous people who are all under the Noahide laws and have no protection of the monarch. And the Noahide laws are the one world religion, okay? So I'm just going to, I was going to do the treaty, but there's no time. So I'll do it later. But here is some other strange going on. In 2017, Alpito William Seo goes to meet the Pope as a representative of New Zealand. In 2019, March, Russell M. Nelson goes to meet the Pope not as a representative. Now, you'll see in a minute. These are the 12 apostles of America, and your declaration has been changed as well. And here is the Maori King, Kingi Tui Teta Potato, the Pope, also in 2019. Now, I want you to... Here's Russell M. Nelson, the leader of the 12 apostles of the Latter-day Saint Church. And on May 27, 2019, here, the Maori King goes to meet the Pope. Now, on May 20, at exactly the same time, So if the king was meeting on the 27th, he would have had to fly there for a couple of days. And around about the same time, Russell M. Nelson meets with the Jacinda Ardern and gives her the Mormon Bible to place in our New Zealand Parliament. And this man here is supposedly called, he is the Prime Minister of the new Maori Central Bank under this flag. That if you go back here, he says, the King of England, the approval of our flag. And if you go down here, we're going to have another video. I'm almost finished. Hang in there. Be strong. We've got this Prime Minister standing under the new flag that's been approved. And who is the king that approved it? Well, it might have been the Maori king. Maybe they're not talking about the 1835 flag. Maybe they're talking about the 1986 flag. And here we've got here called Ariki Manukau, standing with the kingly flag. This is not the flag of New Zealand. And he's called the leader of the sovereign Maori state, Whātua, and chairman of the Board of Governors of the Maori Central Bank, and they've changed the name of New Zealand to be Aotearoa. And we're working under two governments. Working on one government is called the New Zealand government, and then we've got another government that is called the Aotearoa government. And this is why you often hear them speaking about, sometimes they talk about New Zealand and sometimes they talk about Aotearoa, and sometimes they talk about the Declaration of Independence, and sometimes they talk about, where is it? Here. Sometimes they talk about Te Wakaminga, and sometimes they talk about the Declaration of Independence. What I'm saying to you is they're talking about two different governments, two different monarchs, and so that's all I'm going to talk about today, but I will come back to this tomorrow or the next video. Okay, see you later. Good night. It's been a long video.